In today's video, I'm going to be showcasing two different methods to remove a Pressfit bottom bracket. The first is to use a hammer and a drift to forcefully hit the bottom bracket cup until it flies out of the frame. The second, and my preferred method as I'll show in this video, is using a bearing puller tool, which pulls the bearing into a receiving cup to remove it. For both methods, we'll need to remove the crank from the bike. For Shimano, the two pinch bolts need to be loosened on either side. The plastic flap then needs to be raised and the plastic fixing bolt then needs to be removed. Then, the left side crank arm can be removed before encouraging out the axle and the right hand side of the crank. With the crank off, we can really see what rough shape the bottom bracket bearings are in. I'm not even able to spin them around, so it's definitely time for replacement. So first, let's try method number 1 using the hammer and the drift to remove the bottom bracket cups. The tool gets installed through the bottom bracket and then needs to be secured against the bearing. Now, the hammering can begin. Typically what will happen here is the cup will slowly be worked out of the frame and eventually fly out of the shell with the tool. But in this case, despite multiple attempts and heavy hammer hits, the cup didn't budge. At this point, I decided the risk was too high to continue showcasing this method, so I switched over to using the bearing puller. For the puller tool, the drift section is installed into the BB shell, and then an adapter is placed to perfectly fit the bearing. Then, a large threaded screw is installed through the drift and threaded into the receiving cup. A hex key is then used to turn the screw and the bearing is slowly pulled out of the frame. After only around 20 seconds and practically no effort, the bearing cup is out and easily removed from the frame. I found this method to be much lower risk for bearing removal, since it doesn't involve swinging a hammer towards the frame and the pressure is applied in a much more controlled manner. The tool itself is just a basic puller from Amazon, but for the price, the quality, and the function have been great. With both bearings out of the frame, it's easy to see why this bottom bracket was in such rough shape. All of this dirt had accumulated into the shell and eventually damaged the bearings. I used compressed air to blow out the loose dirt and then sprayed the shell with water before wiping out the remaining dirt. I finished off by wiping down the shell with isopropyl alcohol to prepare it for the new bottom bracket. I'm pressing in the new bottom bracket using a bearing press and pressing in the plastic cups dry into the shell. Depending on what style bottom bracket you have, you may need to install the cups with grease or retaining compound. Each bottom bracket size also requires a different press adapter, but most kits usually come with a variety of sizes. I'll link down below to a decent press kit option as well. With the bottom bracket cups pressed in, I can now reinstall the crank onto the bike. I put a bit of grease on the crank axle for a bit of extra protection, and I'm also using a torque wrench to precisely tighten the crank into place. And with that, this job is done. The bottom bracket is spinning smooth, and the bike is ready to ride. I'll link down below to the tools I used in the video, and let me know in the comments what method has worked well for you.